The temporal displacement hit me like a rogue wave. One moment, I was calibrating the chronometer in my lab. The next, the familiar hum of the time stream dissolved into an oppressive silence. My vision swam, and when it cleared, I found myself elsewhere. The air hung heavy with the cloying scent of damp earth and something indefinably ancient. Above, a bruised, violet sky pressed down, devoid of sun or stars, eternal night. I stumbled, my boots sinking into a muddy track. Towering trees, their branches gnarled and skeletal, clawed at the sky. This was no earthly landscape. This was something wrong. Ahead, nestled in the oppressive darkness, I saw it. A village, huddled houses with thatched roofs sagged under the weight of the perpetual night. A flickering light, emanating from a single window, was the only sign of life. I approached cautiously, my hand instinctively reaching for the temporal disruptor holstered at my hip. It was useless for actual fighting, but it could scramble sensors and provide a distraction. The village was eerily silent, just the whisper of the wind through the skeletal trees and the thumping of my own heart. I reached the first house, its wooden door warped and cracked. I hesitated, then knocked. The sound echoed strangely in the stillness. The door creaked open, revealing a woman. She was old. Her face, etched with wrinkles that spoke of a life lived under unimaginable hardship. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a spark of something, wary but not unfriendly. She was dressed in simple homespun clothes, dyed a dull, earthy brown. "And what brings you to Shadowfen?" I lowered my hand from my disruptor. "My name is Elias Thorne. I'm a traveler. I seem to have lost my way." She studied me for a long moment, her gaze unnervingly perceptive. "Lost your way? No one comes to Shadowfen by accident, traveler, and no one leaves." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Trapped, I was trapped. But I couldn't show my fear. "I assure you, it was an accident. I just need directions to the nearest town." The woman laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Shadowfen is all there is." I decided to try a different approach. "Why is it always night here?" Her eyes flickered with a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. "That is a long story, traveler. A story of betrayal, of sacrifice, of a curse laid upon this village long ago." "A curse?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. As a historian specializing in temporal anomalies, I'd come across legends of curses and supernatural phenomena before, but I always dismissed them as folklore. But here, in this impossible place, I couldn't afford to be so dismissive. "It is cold out here. I am Alara. I will tell you the story of Shadowfen, but be warned, traveler, some stories are best left untold." I followed her inside. The house was sparsely furnished, with a single table, 2 chairs, and a hearth where a small fire flickered, providing the only light. The air inside was thick with the smell of wood smoke and dried herbs. Ilara settled into one of the chairs and gestured for me to sit opposite her. "Long ago," she began, her voice taking on a wistful tone, "Shadowfen was a thriving village, blessed with fertile land and a benevolent sun. ... But there was another god, a forgotten god of the night, Nyxos. He was jealous of Solaris's power and the villagers' devotion to her. He craved their worship, their attention. But they ignored him, believing him to be a relic of a bygone era. One day, Nyxos appeared before the village elder, a man named Theron, and offered him a pact. He promised eternal prosperity and protection from all harm in exchange for the village's allegiance. Theron, blinded by greed and ambition, agreed. He built a shrine to Nyxos in the heart of the village and ordered the villagers to worship him instead of Solaris. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, until finally the sun disappeared altogether. Eternal night descended upon Shadowfen, a testament to Theron's treachery and Nyxos's wrath. But that wasn't the end of it, Alara continued, her voice trembling. Nyxos's promises proved to be hollow. He brought not prosperity but despair. The crops withered, the livestock died, and the villagers grew sick and weak. They begged Theron to undo the pact, but he refused, clinging to his power and his promises. In desperation, a young woman named Lyra, Theron's own daughter, decided to take matters into her own hands. She ventured into the forbidden forest, seeking a way to appease the sun goddess. Lyra faced many dangers in the forest, battling monstrous creatures and overcoming treacherous obstacles. But she persevered, driven by her love for her village and her faith in Solaris. Finally, she reached the sacred grove, where the sun goddess was said to reside. There, she pleaded with Solaris to forgive the village's transgressions and restore the sun to Shadowfen. Solaris, moved by Lyra's courage and selflessness, agreed to help, but she demanded a sacrifice. ... Lyra understood what she had to do. She returned to the village and confronted her father, Theron. She told him that she would sacrifice herself to break the curse, but only if he repented and renounced his allegiance to Nyxos. Theron, overcome with guilt and remorse, finally agreed. He destroyed the shrine to Nyxos and begged Solaris for forgiveness. Then, Lyra climbed to the highest point in the village and offered herself as a sacrifice to the sun goddess. Solaris accepted her sacrifice, and a single ray of sunlight pierced through the eternal night, striking Lyra's heart. The sun did not return permanently, but it did return briefly each year, on the anniversary of Lyra's sacrifice, a fleeting moment of light in an eternity of darkness. Alara fell silent, her eyes filled with tears. And that is the story of Shadowfen, traveler, a story of darkness and a glimmer of hope. I was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of her words. So, the village is trapped in eternal night, except for one day a year? Yes, Alara said. The day of Lyra, we call it. It is a day of remembrance and hope. ... Is there any way to break the curse permanently? I asked. Alara shook her head. No one knows. Many have tried, but all have failed. The curse of Nyxos is too strong. But I couldn't accept that. As a time traveler, I knew that the past could be changed, that even the most ancient curses could be broken. I just needed to find the key. I'm not like the others, I said. I have skills, knowledge. I believe I can help you. Alara looked at me skeptically. What makes you so different, traveler? I'm not from this time, I said, choosing my words carefully. A place where things like this are studied. I know how to unravel mysteries, to break curses. Alara studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Finally, she nodded. Very well, traveler, I will help you. But be warned, Nyxos is still powerful here. He will not let you interfere without a fight. And so, my investigation began. I spent the next few days exploring Shadowfen, talking to the villagers, and researching the history of the curse. I learned that the village was built on an ancient nexus point, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. I also learned that the villagers were not entirely helpless. They had developed their own unique form of magic, based on the manipulation of shadows and the channeling of lunar energy. They used this magic to protect themselves from the creatures that roamed the forest and to sustain themselves in the perpetual darkness. One evening, while studying ancient texts in the village library, I stumbled upon a passage that mentioned a hidden artifact, the Sunstone. It was said to be a relic of Solaris, imbued with her divine power. The Sunstone was hidden somewhere in the Forbidden Forest, protected by ancient wards and guarded by monstrous creatures. It was a perilous quest, but I knew that it was the only way to break the curse. I gathered a small group of villagers to accompany me on my quest. There was Alara, of course, with her knowledge of the village's history and her understanding of the curse. There was also Kale, a young warrior with unmatched skill in combat and a burning desire to avenge his ancestors. And finally there was Maya, a talented shadow weaver with the ability to manipulate shadows and create illusions. The darkness was oppressive, the air thick with the stench of decay. The trees seemed to watch us, their skeletal branches reaching out like grasping claws. We navigated through treacherous terrain, battling monstrous creatures and avoiding hidden traps. Maya's shadow weaving proved invaluable, allowing us to create illusions to confuse our enemies and to navigate through the darkest parts of the forest. Kale's combat skills kept us safe from the creatures that lurked in the shadows. and Alara's knowledge of the ancient paths helped us to avoid the most dangerous areas. The grove was a place of eerie beauty, bathed in a pale, ethereal light. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches intertwined to form a natural canopy. In the center of the grove stood a stone altar, covered in moss and lichen. As we approached the altar, the air crackled with energy. A figure materialized before us, cloaked in shadows. It was Nyxos, the god of the night, his eyes burning with malevolent rage. "You dare trespass in my domain?" he roared, his voice echoing through the grove. "You cannot escape my wrath." Nyxos unleashed his power upon us, summoning shadowy creatures to attack. Kale battled with unmatched ferocity, cutting down the creatures with his enchanted sword. Maya weaved illusions, confusing the creatures and creating openings for us to attack. But Nyxos was too powerful. He unleashed a wave of darkness that engulfed us, draining our strength and extinguishing our hope. I felt my temporal disruptor being ripped from my grasp, useless against a god. Just when I thought all was lost, Alara stepped forward. She raised her hands and began to chant in an ancient language. "Nyxos," she cried, "you have deceived this village for too long. Your promises are false. Your power is based on lies. You will not win here." Ilara's words struck a chord with the land. The trees began to sway. The ground trembled and the air crackled with energy. Nyxos staggered back, his eyes wide with fear. Seizing the opportunity, I rushed towards the altar. I reached out and touched the sunstone. A surge of power coursed through my veins, banishing the darkness and filling the grove with light. He screamed in rage and frustration, but his power was fading. "This is not over," he roared. "I will return." With a final burst of power, the sunstone shattered into a million pieces, its energy spreading throughout the forest and beyond. Nyxos vanished, his curse broken forever. As the light faded, I looked around at my companions. Alara was weak but alive. Kale and Maya were bruised and battered, but they were smiling. We had done it. We had broken the curse of Shadowfen. We returned to the village, where we were greeted as heroes. The sun rose slowly above the horizon, casting a golden glow on the village. The trees shed their skeletal branches, bursting forth with vibrant green leaves. The air was filled with the sound of birdsong and the laughter of children. Shadowfen was reborn. My mission was complete. It was time for me to return to my own time. I said my farewells to Alara, Kale, and Maya, promising to never forget them. They had become my friends, my allies in the fight against darkness. Yetevils alisi samen told Masses Bill. Widevils samen mors alisi samens. Widevils samen vildewani. I activated my temporal device and stepped into the time stream. When I materialized back in my lab, everything was as I had left it. The chronometer was still calibrated. The air still smelled of ozone and electricity, but I was not the same. I had seen the darkness and I had fought against it. I had witnessed the power of hope and the strength of the human spirit. And I knew that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light waiting to be found. The sunstone was gone, but its light lived on in the hearts of the people of Shadowfen, and in my own. The memory of the village, trapped in perpetual night, served as a constant reminder of the delicate balance of time and the importance of protecting the past, present, and future. The experience changed me, made me more aware of the consequences of tampering with time. I vowed to be more careful, more responsible in my travels. The universe was a complex and fragile tapestry, and even the smallest alteration could have unforeseen consequences. And sometimes, a curse broken in one timeline can echo across others, a ripple of hope in the vast ocean of time.